Hello and welcome to this follow-up of the Omniverse installer tutorial. In this tutorial, we're going to go through some of the key components that were installed during the installation and is useful for getting acclimated to where things are located, how to find all the necessary tools, and what they do. Please note, however, that this tutorial does assume that you went through the entire installer and included all components. If you have not included some of the components, you can expect to be missing some of the pieces that we're going to be talking about here. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. Because the Omniverse is a network-connected application and is intended to be working with multiple users, one of the first things you're going to want to know about is your system monitor. So let's go ahead and take a look at that now. To get to it, simply move to your system tray icons. And if you pop up this little chevron, you should see that you have the Omniverse system monitor running in your background. Let's go ahead and drag that icon down to the bottom so we always have it running and is always visible right here. We're going to want to use this fairly often, so it's something that you're going to want to have just very easily available. So let's just drag it over to here, and now it's not in that little chevron pop-up. Okay, it's just kind of sitting there. And if we right-click on it and hit Settings, note that it opened up a web browser and went to the address localhost :3080. You don't actually have to use this settings button. You could just launch a browser and type in the same address, and you'll come to the same position. What this means is that it's basically a network application and it runs under Omniverse Web. Now, let's go ahead and explore the utilities found within this page. Let's first of all maximize our browser, and we should be able to see all the services running on your Omniverse Nucleus server. Most all of these are running directly within your Nucleus and don't really need to be bothered with too much. But if they do stop for some reason, you have the ability to start them over again. So this gives you the ability to relaunch services in case something stops working. Another key aspect of this panel is the ability to enable sharing. If we click on the Enable Sharing, other users can now connect to and make use of our Omniverse Nucleus server with core tools such as Kit or Omniverse View, or with plugin supported connector tools such as Maya, Max, Revit, SketchUp, and many more to come. When prompted by any of these applications, the user will simply need to enter the IP address of the Nucleus server, followed by :3009. So for this machine, we can find out the IP address by selecting Start, Command Prompt, type in ipconfig, and I can see that my IP address is 192.168.1.117, and we would just follow that with :3009. Okay, so now that we understand the basics of how to start and stop sharing, as well as how to start and stop our services, we can go ahead and move on to the next tab. Let's jump into the Cache tab. Because of the nature of the Omniverse, we are going to be dealing with relatively large files, whether they be textures, models, all sorts of different things, sounds, etc. We're going to have large files transferring back and forth from a server to our computer regularly. When we are dealing with external servers, our cache is going to become a very important part of our workflow. The cache will take files that we've loaded from a server and store them locally so that when we reload that file, we're going to get them very quickly, rather than having to wait for a network transaction. This is extremely convenient. However, it does have a tendency to grow in size over time. Every once in a while, you may wish to clear your cache. When you do so, it's going to return this back to 0. Since this is a fresh install, yours should also be at 0 bytes and 0 cached files. But as you work with network-connected servers, you're going to see that this is going to grow and grow and grow. This is very beneficial because it does increase your speed. However, it does take up drive space. So every once in a while, you might want to clear them. That said, you should try not to unless you absolutely have to. If you find that your disk space is getting abused, then you can go ahead and clear it and it'll slowly grow over time again. If, however, you want to just move it to a much bigger drive or something that has a lot more available space, you can always reset this path by typing in a path of your choosing and then hitting apply. This one happens to be good for me for now, so I'm going to go ahead and leave it where it is. That said, you can change it as necessary. You can also enable or disable cache as you please, and this will go ahead and disable the service or re-enable the service. Okay, so that pretty much covers the local cache. However, we also have the ability to set up a remote cache. The remote cache is intended for larger organizations where you may have multi-site setups. This is typically going to be set up by a system administrator. However, I'll go through the basics of how this works with a diagram. In a larger organization where you have a nucleus server that may be in a remote location and requires an internet or a slower network to get to, you can set up what's called an upstream cache. The upstream cache allows you to connect with multiple clients to one upstream cache. Therefore, if any client connects to the upstream cache and gets a piece of data, it is now cached on this local higher speed network. Therefore, all the subsequent computers that go to get that data won't have to travel through the internet to get to the main nucleus server, but instead will only have to short stop to this upstream cache. Simply stated, by utilizing an upstream cache, we can dramatically increase the performance and reduce the amount of traffic on larger networks very easily. Okay, so understanding all this, be aware that this is not necessary and is an option for larger organizations. And this upstream cache server would be something that your system administrator would set up. There's plenty of documentation on how to go ahead and do this in the Omniverse documentation. However, if you do have one, or you suspect you have one, speak to your system administrator. They can give you the upstream cache server address, and you will simply enter it into this remote control panel. Press apply, and you will now have access to that remote cache. That's going to pretty much cover the cache service, and we'll go ahead and move on to the Connections tab. Here in the Connections tab, we have a convenient and easy way to add connections to other nucleus servers. We can have a connection to one or many. It doesn't really matter. Let's go ahead and start by connecting to our localhost server. Let's hit Add and type in the term localhost. Then press Next and enter the username and password that you entered while doing the installation. Once logged in, we will see that we now have a localhost server and it is connected. Once connected, the localhost is now going to be available to any supporting Omniverse application and will use this token to connect. If you have other servers to connect to, you can go ahead and add them now. If your organization is using single sign-on, you can go ahead and use the single sign-on button here at the bottom. In my case, I'm going to go ahead and do so and use my credentials to log in. Once connected, it'll act the same way. If we go back to our Connections tab, we will see that we now have two different servers that are going to be available in all of the supporting applications. This is very convenient, and once you've logged in, allows effortless usage between all the different tools of the Omniverse. Last on our list is going to be the logs. Within the logs, we can find different information about the cache access, the cache status, and the Nucleus API. This is basically a readout of all connections and things that are going on with your Omniverse connections. But generally speaking, you shouldn't really need to use it very often. That said, this is where all data is logged and is a good location to know in case you run into any issues. Okay, so that's going to go ahead and complete everything that we need to know about the system monitor. But there's still a few more things to cover. So let's go ahead and close this window and we'll move on to the next topic. When Omniverse installed, it installed a handful of components and they're stored under the NVIDIA Corporation folder in your Start menu. So let's go ahead and go there now. Press the Start key, then navigate to NVIDIA Corporation and open up the folder called NVIDIA Corporation. Within here, there's going to be a few things we'll probably want to bookmark. Let's go ahead and right-click on Kit 2020 and say Pin to Start. Let's also pin the Omniverse Web, the Omniverse System Monitor, Omniverse Drive, and lastly, Omniverse Docs. Excellent. Let's go ahead and organize these a little better. And we're good to go. Great. Okay, so now that this is all organized, we can start with the System Monitor. If for some reason your System Monitor dies or goes offline or you quit it, you can just use that System Monitor icon to relaunch the System Monitor. And it'll restart, and you're now back in business. Okay, great. The next item on our list will be Omniverse Web. Let's go ahead and select that icon now. And we will see that we come to a web page with the address of localhost 8080/login. Be aware that you can change this localhost to your IP address and give that away for others to connect to this web service as well. Okay, so let's go ahead and log in using the username and password that we used at the installation of our Omniverse. And we are now connected. At first glance, Omniverse Web will seem as if it is just a file browser, but it is much more powerful than that. And though we won't go through all of the details of what the Omniverse Web can do for you, we will briefly cover the basics. So the first thing to know is that it does actually act like a file browser. Beginning with an organized directory structure, when users are created, they are automatically given a user folder. Within here, you can find that my Paul folder has been created and that it is empty. I can add new content to here or create new folders as I please. Let's go ahead and add my first folder. This one's going to be called Electric Outlets. And as you can see, I can create folders and then populate those folders with content from tools such as Kit or any of the other Connect tools. That said, Omniverse Web also allows us to upload FBX files directly to the Omniverse Web and convert them on the fly. Another key aspect of Omniverse Web is the ability to assign permissions. We can easily select a file and set permissions for a specific user or group. Omniverse Web also grants the ability to do a form of backup called a snapshot. If you right-click on any file, you can go ahead and say Create Snapshot. When you do so, you just go ahead and enter a name if you would like, and a description that is absolutely required. For this one, I'm going to say Backup Test. Once the snapshot is created, we can locate that snapshot by selecting the file and selecting the Snapshots dropdown. Here we can see what snapshots exist, and of course we can load them up by restoring. Moving along, let's take a look at our mount. If you had selected the NVIDIA samples mount in the installer, you will have this folder sitting here, and you can see that it is locked. What that means is that it's just a read-only file. You can transfer these contents to your other directories if you would like, or you can open them and edit them in something like Omniverse Kit and save them to where you would like. Okay, so as we can see, Omniverse Web offers a plethora of tools and is an intricate part of our Omniverse experience. Let's move along to the next component. In this case, we're going to be looking at Omniverse Drive. And as you can see, it will once again ask us for our Omniverse server. As normal, we can replace this localhost with our IP address if we would like, and share that as the location for connecting to our server if other users want to connect with Drive. We're going to go ahead and leave it as is and say sign in. Once again, we will be directed to our localhost sign-in box, where we will use our password and username that we assigned at installation, and log in. You can now switch back to Omniverse Drive, and once here, you will have a couple options. You can sign out, which will of course disconnect you. You can check out the log files, or most importantly, you can select the drive letter you would like to mount. We're going to go ahead and use O for Omniverse and hit OK. Now, it will seem as if nothing has happened, but in fact we actually have a drive located on our file browser, and if we check in our computer, we should have Omniverse Drive at localhost 3009. This is effectively a reiteration of what we just saw in Omniverse Web, only this is specifically a file browser. That said, all these files are now available directly inside your computer and are mounted as a drive, so you can use it just like any other drive on your machine, and you can manipulate and move files just as you would with your file browser. Moving right along, we're going to now move on to Omniverse Kit. Let's go ahead and launch that now by pressing the Start and clicking on Kit. Omniverse Kit is your primary USD editing tool inside the Omniverse. With it, you can open up any of your files that you have imported into the Omniverse by simply navigating to your user folder and opening up a USD file. Here you can see I've got my USD file open and ready, and I can start reviewing it and working with it directly on my Omniverse nucleus. The tools in Omniverse Kit are far too vast to go through in this singular tutorial, and is definitely not applicable for a short video like this. However, I would like to bring your attention to the NVIDIA mount folder that should be located under your local host. Within this mount, you can find all sorts of samples which you can use to review and learn the basics of Omniverse Kit and what its capabilities are. Let's go ahead and load up the astronaut scene. Once loaded, you can go ahead and navigate the scene by rotating around it by hitting Alt and clicking and dragging. You can zoom in and out by using your mouse wheel, and you can use the WASD keys by holding down your right mouse button in order to move around. So hold down right mouse button, press W to move forward, S to move backwards, A to move left, D to move right. Q and E can be used for moving up and down. Additionally, we can always open up our stage panel and look at the basic format and structure of our scene. If you would like to start playing by creating some assets, you can do so under the Create panel, where you can create meshes, and they should appear on your screen, where you can now move, rotate, and scale at your own convenience. You can also change the renderer from RTX to path traced to get outstanding rendering results. Omniverse Kit really gives you a lot of capability, and the renderings can just be fantastic. Without belaboring this any further, I'm just going to say that there is plenty of documentation on how to utilize Kit inside the documentation. Let's go ahead and close Omniverse Kit for now, and let's take a look at our last piece of componentry, connectors. To get to a connector, simply launch either Max or Maya, depending on which ones you have installed. In my case, I'm going to go ahead and load up Maya, but this would be the same for Autodesk 3ds Max, Maya, Revit, and many other connector tools. Connector tools are simply a tool that has a plugin that allows you to send directly to the Omniverse from your host application. For example, in Maya, we have this little panel that allows us to connect and export all of our files directly to the Omniverse. We can also open files from the Omniverse, and we can open USD files local to our computer. Now, every connector tool is slightly different, but in general, they'll all have tools similar to this. If you want to find more detailed information about a connector tool of your choosing, go ahead and go to docs.omniverse.nvidia.com and find your connector tool for deeper instructions on that specific tool. Okay, that's going to go ahead and conclude this tutorial for the most part, but I would like to leave you with one last piece of information. I've been mentioning the docs.omniverse.nvidia.com for quite a while now, but I want you to be aware that in your Start panel, you do have the ability to go directly to that address with one click. Simply click the link and you will come to docs.omniverse.nvidia.com, where you can find more complete information on tools such as Kit, connector tools, Nucleus, and much more. With the information found in the documentation, you should be able to arm yourself to become a pro with Omniverse in no time. Thank you for watching this tutorial, and hopefully it was helpful in getting you started with the Omniverse. I look forward to seeing you in future tutorials.